Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. North Carolina has fallen short of federal special education standards. Department of Education officials released a report saying the state is failing to assess students quickly and that it isn't properly preparing students for life after high school. State officials blame it on teacher turnover and the need for other special education resources. WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst has been examining the report, and she joins us now. Emily, good to see you.
Glad to be here.
Emily, the federal government put out a new report saying the state is failing its special education students. What did the report say?
Right. So it goes over basically like 18 different metrics, and there are kind of some subgenres within each of them. And it said the state was doing okay in some of those, and some of those it wasn't doing great, but hadn't gotten worse. And then in some of them, it said no. 100% of students are supposed to be evaluated on time. So basically, what that means is if a parent or a teacher or somebody suspects that a student might have a disability that's affecting their education, they can request an evaluation, and those evaluations are supposed to be done in 90 days. That's the law in North Carolina. And the state is not doing that. I mean, thousands of kids are not being evaluated within those 3 months. It was more than 12,000 during the 2023-24 school year. So that was one of the big things where they're just not meeting compliance. The standard for that is 100%. The state also fell short in terms of resolving complaints on time. So, there were over 200 findings of noncompliance, and they hadn't been resolved within a year. So in other words, they were told what was wrong, and it hadn't been fixed after a year. Another big area where they fell short was in transition planning. So basically what that is when you're 16 and you're a student with a disability, you're supposed to have a transition plan that has like these clear, measurable goals. It's really your transition into adulthood, life after high school. And it's supposed to have these specific goals in there, like so-and-so will volunteer so many hours a week at such and such place. And basically, these plans just don't contain those things. It'll say like, such and such student really likes dogs. Maybe he wants a job with dogs. And it's just not specific. So, less than half of students have a plan with those specific things in them.
Now, this isn't the first time the state has received a needs improvement rating from the federal government, and data indicates that the performance of special education students is also slipping in the state, right?
Right. So there are some other metrics in the report on actually a lot more students with disabilities are dropping out of high school now. So that percentage actually went up significantly. So really it's a percentage of students who left the special education program because they dropped out. That went up from like 4% to about 16% over the course of a few years. So there's some places to be concerned about engaging these students and making sure they get an education.
What is the state saying in response to this report?
So basically, what they pointed to in this report several times in several different places was staff attrition is contributing to this. So when they pointed out, the federal government pointed out the transition plans falling short, that most kids didn't have adequate ones, the state responded by saying that teacher attrition had significantly affected their ability to do this. So, and that was one thing a lot of advocates brought up too, because they said, if you don't have enough trained teachers with adequate caseloads, some of these kids might fall by the wayside, or, you just don't have a trained teacher who really knows everything that's required and exactly how to do it. Another thing they pointed out, the state pointed out, was funding. And that was also something a lot of advocates pointed out, advocates for people with disabilities, was basically, there's in North Carolina, there's a flat rate of funding per student. That's something they've been pointing out a lot. We need to have more money for students with more severe disabilities. And also the federal government, when they implemented this special education law, that's the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, it's commonly referred to as ADEA, Congress said, hey, we're going to fund 40% of the average per student cost of this program. So you tell us how much it costs, we'll fund 40% of that. They said that back in the 70s when they passed this law. They've never come close to that. We saw a report recently from the National Education Association that said they think it's never really gotten higher than 15%. And so that's long been documented. There's just not enough funding for more teachers who can take on more students and actually pay closer attention to these things, create partnerships with community groups to work with kids, things like that.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear more about the hurdles preventing the state from improving special education. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst about special education in North Carolina. Emily, the federal government, as you mentioned, is focusing on a few areas of the state's special education performance, and you mentioned that one of them is measuring goals for students about to leave high school. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Right, so they're called transition plans. You have to have one starting at age 14. By the time you're 16, they need to be detailed. They need to have concrete plans, and here is what we're going to do. A lot of kids in special education, they're going to go on to maybe go to college, they're going to get a job. Some of them may not need, these robust transition planning, and some of them might need to, because when they go on to the next level, they're going to need certain accommodations. What's going to be the appropriate fit for them? What are they going to need while they're there? And then some of them need, exposure to job training. They could get that in high school through volunteering, through partnerships with outside organizations to do a little bit of work during the week, learn certain skill sets, things that basically prepare you to be independent as an adult or close to independent for some of these students. And so essentially, if this transition plan doesn't have these clear measurable goals, you're kind of left a little bit more in the dark. That's what we heard from parents. That's what we heard from different advocacy groups, that these plans are really critical because sometimes, a student will they'll leave high school, they'll either graduate or they'll go through more of a completion process. It's where you don't necessarily meet the graduation requirements, but you complete high school. And basically, then they don't know what to do next. Their parents aren't really sure. They're looking for, what can my son do during the day? I think he'd like to do something. He'd like to work. He'd like to volunteer, and they're just not sure what to do.
Now, you spoke with one parent who described her son's journey through the state's public schools. What did she tell you?
Right. So she really liked her school. She sent her son to a school in Union County that's specifically for students with disabilities. But she is a little bit lost now that he has left that school. She would like him to work in some way or get some kind of experience. He does need assistance, so he can't, work fully independently. But she was hoping to find him something to occupy his time to keep him interested, because he can walk, he can talk, he can do all kinds of things. And she really wants something for him, and she has been very stressed out. He completed high school just through the completion track back in June, and she and his father are still trying to figure out what he can do now.
Now, obviously, money can be a cure-all, but there isn't always a lot of it to go around, especially in education. In the absence of a lot of money, what is the state doing to improve?
So a lot of these issues can at least be partially addressed through training. So one thing the state does is when the federal government finds these faults, and the state can find some faults on its own, when people submit complaints and go to the state saying, hey, this thing isn't working. Basically what the state can do is they can go to the school and they can provide some assistance of, hey, this is what you're supposed to do, this is how it's supposed to work, and, write kind of corrective actions of this is what you're supposed to do differently. So it's something like the transition plans. That's something a lot of people think could just be improved by training. If you just let people know this is actually how you're supposed to write them, that could at least help. But, then there are other aspects of it of, are they connected with community organizations? And you're really just making it not just about a knowledge base, but are you actually prepared to work with groups to get these things in the plan? So training is a big part of it, making sure people know what the rules are. And that's kind of what the state is really focused on.
Now, lawmakers are the ones who approve the money. Are they doing anything to help?
So there's been legislation proposed over the years related to special education. When it comes to funding, something that state lawmakers have done numerous times, I think at least 4 times in the last 30 years, is they have passed a bill or a budget or something that included a provision to study how to better fund special education in the state. And they've gotten several times now a report back from some kind of third party that says you need to fix it and here's what you should do instead. They got that as recently as last year, saying you should fund students with disabilities to have more money for more severe disabilities. You can have even less money for students with less severe disabilities. And then there were some other things in there about exactly how it would work. It would have ended up, this most recent suggestion would have ended up costing the state more money. That was put in a bill that just never went anywhere earlier this year. Funding is a big issue with the state legislature right now. There is not a state budget so far, just sort of a few things here and there that have been approved.
Going to be interesting to see how the state fares in its next review. Thanks, Emily.
Of course.
That's WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst. For her in-depth report on the state's special education ratings, go to the education section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.